to everyone for having joined the 25th virtual lecture on the theme of philosophy, Romani philosophy of living and surviving. And today we have a very prominent speaker, and Mr. Orhan Tahir, who is a staunch human rights activist, lawyer by profession, and a particle scientist and sophologist, and a journalist, a well-known journalist in Europe. So Mr. Tahir was also a legal advisor of Citizens for Democracy and Rule of Law in Belgium. He used to provide the legal assistance for a strategic litigation to tackle human rights violations and issues that have not been adequately and significantly addressed in law or politics in the European countries. Mr. Orhan, he has a number of publications, his research articles, which were published in a different international magazines, journals, and periodicals. His articles like what is awaiting the next 10 years, what is awaiting Roma after the integration. That is a very interesting research article. And then, can the subaltern speak? These articles are really revolutionary and very informative and raising very pertinent questions about uh, the human rights violation and transgression of Roma community across Europe. So today's lecture aims at exploring the philosophical realms of Roma community and demonstrating their ethnic traditional values. So holding on to Indian cultural values, Roma, as all of you know, that the Roma believe in a higher spiritual power and a broader sense of humanity because they are respectful to all religions and creeds and other religious orders. And in line with our reality, the percept of Vasudev Kutumbakam, which is also the central theme of G20. G20. That's as you are aware that the India got the G20 presidency and hosting the G20 meetings in India. So Roma are not only means the example or paragon of peaceful and harmonious coexistence amongst the diverse societies, but also an exemplary model of a constructive integration, living as equals with their neighbors, but keeping their heritage alive. And despite the long, vicious cycle of slanders, discriminations, and even the persecution of the community, as they do not claim any specific religious dogma, they share and celebrate together with the Christians festival and the Muslim festival or the Jews festival. Roma have preserved many beliefs and values reminiscent of Indian religions and the Vedic religions, which continue in day-to-day cultural behavior, and they still behave more or less in a same way as they used to conduct themselves in India and their forefathers in the Proto-Roma. So Roma also believe, I don't want to elaborate because we have a very eminent speaker, and we have our convener of Center for Roma Studies and Cultural Relation, Dr. Rajni Sarinji, and I humbly request her to deliver the remarks.
Mhm. It is great pleasure and honor that you all are here. I welcome you all on this prestigious topic regarding survival of Romas. One should remember that philosophy is a personal and ever evolving journey. It is up to you to explore and develop your own philosophy of living and surviving. One of those resonates with your values and helps you lead a fulfilled and purposeful life. As we know, Romas have fulfilled, they are survived, they have all the odds in their life. Still, were fighting and they are fighting for their recognition and their survival. As Mr. Jahir has just mentioned, they are still carrying the thousands year old Vedic culture with them. I wish all the best to all of you. Now we'd like to request Jamir to introduce Professor and start the topic.
Thank you very much, Rimiji. Now we have the Professor Dr. Prasanansu. He is the professor at the Department of English at National Law University. So I request Professor Prasanansu to deliver opening remarks. Now, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zamir, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today. And my special regards to Shyam Parandeji and all the dignitaries on the dais, and to the speaker today. And Punita ji is there, and my students are there. Dr. Nitesh and Jim was also there. This is a very wonderful topic, and we look forward to listening to the speaker, Orhan, Dr. Orhan today. This is about Romani philosophy of living and surviving. I think this topic may not be so apt for any other group other than the Roma communities, because they have not only survived but lived. They have lived and survived both. And that also in the face of the most dire adversities, like around 1,000 years ago, as everyone knows, when the Roma ancestors were taken forcibly away from Kannauj and other parts of India. It was an issue of survival. Biological survival is one aspect. The other aspect is the survival of culture, philosophy, way of life. And I think that anyone who could survive and retain some special characteristics of their own over this millennia, over 1,000 years, and amongst the diversity that they have within their communities, because ab initio diversities and the diversities that arose later on because they were distributed in different areas, but still there is a unification. There is a unified force, unifying force, and that is the philosophy, the underlying philosophy. As Madam was also saying, that that is something that they have carried maybe from India and the Indian way of life, as Mr. Zamir was saying, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, that whole of the world is a family. So this all has survived amongst the gruesome history, the most terrifying of times. Like, I will just mention a few things. Selling of women and children as slaves in the markets of Middle East. And after that, the persecution which is continuing to the day. And as recently as 100 years ago or so, that's my impression, we hear the stories of people being shot and hung outside the village so that other Roma people dare not enter the villages. So in this background, maintaining the sanity, mental stability, and cultural community continuity are almost an impossible task that is possible only by a philosophy, a philosophical background. We see some other groups also, like the people in Mauritius of Indian origin, and we see that they have maintained the culture in a very, very visible way. This visibility is because their migration has been very recent, and perhaps they were not subjected to this level of atrocity and persecution. Obviously, it was not simple for them. I am not trying to belittle anything. So that is one thing. But if we look at the Roma groups, we would see that the language, the Romani language, has a very clear and distinct identity and continuity with the Indian languages. I have even proposed that this language be called or classified as modern Indo-European language. We are trying to write research papers on this. That is one aspect. Then you see that adaptability is another part of the culture of the Roma people. And this adaptability you see as religious adaptability. They have adopted the religions of the regions they have migrated to, of the environment. But still, the unifying figure is of Kali Sara, which remains. So this assimilative nature is again something we can trace to Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And another important aspect is that in spite of all the diversity, all the duress, all the forces, if you go to a Roma home, you see some traditions that are very similar, that are unifying amongst themselves and also unifies them with the Indian diaspora and communities. For example, I remember one concept, the concept of laying the table full, even if a single guest is expected. And the Roma people say that we expect more people to come or anyone may come. This hospitality, this openness, this warmth, I think this is also a part of the philosophy, the cultural philosophy, the community philosophy, although there are so many diverse groups. So without taking much more time, I invite the speaker and I hope that we would be able to get a better insight, deeper insight into these mechanisms of thinking, thought processes, and philosophy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, for your very succinct. Thank you very much, Professor Prasanansuji, for your very succinct and comprehensive and insightful remarks. And you touched upon different aspects from philosophy to religion. So thank you very much. Now we have our Secretary General, Honorable Shri Syam Prandeji, and under his adroit guidance, this center is running. So I humbly request him to deliver the welcome address, sir. No, sir.
Right. Okay. The chair, Dr. Rajni Sarinji, Professor Prasanansu ji, and Sri Narayan Kumar ji, who is here, all other participants online are all welcome, especially today's speaker, Mr. Orhan Tahir. This monthly lecture, which happens to be 25th. We started these lectures during the Corona times, and it's 2 years plus. Every month, we are conducting itself is a great credit to the organization that non-stop lectures we have. Very eminent speakers have been invited. They spoke well. Some of them have even submitted what they spoke, and I request all the speakers, because this can be a publication, a valuable publication on Roma communities across the world, as the speakers covered till now, the whole of Europe, America also, and there'll be more. Today's lecture was preceded by a 24 hours non-stop program a fortnight earlier, which had a theme of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. One earth, one family, one future. This is India's G20 presidency and we, Antarashtriya Sahyog Parishad, being part of the Civil Society 20, have been awarded the theme Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam itself, which happens to be motto of ARSP, Antarashtriya Sahyog Parishad. And today's lecture is quite connected to it or very affiliated to it, in the sense there's a very commonplace quote in Hindi which says, Gio or jeene do, live and let live. But survival, of course, the instinct of survival makes person stand up and be counted. So this where the Roma all along the history had been run like that, and we find Roma community now rising faster than what they had earlier been. Last couple of centuries were bad. As a matter of fact, it's human rights issue and all that. Despite that, today we're rising and talking about their philosophy and philosophy of life that forms the backbone or solid foundation of their living. So I take this opportunity to welcome you all to this 25th lecture. And what I said about the 24 hours continuous program, I'm glad to appreciate and thank the Roma community participants, 8 of them, who during those 24 hours continuous program were 165 speakers from 107 countries spoke, and there was much higher attendance in the program, like 1,300 people attended the program through those 24 hours. And this was the Roma part was really appreciated by the Indian diaspora from all over the world. They have written to us that they have for the first time become aware that Roma are connected to India. And that's why this was a very welcome move, as a matter of fact. The message is gone across the world, and the diaspora connect with you all. So welcoming you again, and thanking you, and welcome to our Mr. Orhan Tahir. Namaste.
Thank you very much, sir, for your welcome address. You touched upon the past 24 hours round the clock international conference on the theme of Sun Never Sets on Indian Diaspora. And you talked about how the Indian diaspora across the world appreciated and wanted to connect with the Roma community. That is really very valuable step forward to connect the forgotten children of India, Roma, with our other diaspora or diasporic groups residing across the world. So without any delay, now as we have a very eminent speaker, Mr. Tahir, and we are very much interested in listening to him. So I request Mr. Tahir to deliver his speech and enlighten us with your comprehensive knowledge on the subject. Thank you very much. Floor is yours, Mr. Tahir.
Thank you very much. I am very glad that so many people were interested in my presentation. And so many people are present today here in Zoom. The philosophy of living of Roma people is actually a philosophy of survival, philosophy of surviving. But what does it mean to survive over 1,000 years in Europe in times of persecution, deportations, and assimilation? Because my people was subjected to all this violence and persecution over the centuries. And despite of everything, Roma people were able to survive, to preserve the Romani language, identity, culture. And this is extremely important because I think that there is no other ethnic group in Europe which was able to survive in such harsh conditions. Very often, comparisons have been made with Jewish people. It's true that the Jewish people were present in Europe much longer. They are another dispersed community, diaspora, but in the case of Jewish people, there is actually a unique unifying religion, written language, holy books. Nothing like this existed in the Roma culture. Roma were able to survive, divided, dispersed, very often following different religions. Even today, some are Christians, some are Catholics, others are evangelicals, others are Muslims, others are Orthodox Christians. This is big internal diversity. And internal diversity is actually one of the characteristics of Roma living and survival, of the Roma philosophy of living and survival. So Roma didn't have holy books. Roma don't have a written memory. And that's why the survival of Roma is a miracle, especially the survival of the Romani language, which is related to the ancient Sanskrit. In some aspects, it's good to be known, it should be mentioned that in some aspects, Romanes or Romaniship is more conservative than many of the today Indian Indo-Aryan languages, because it preserved some older, more conservative elements that the modern Indian languages have lost. They couldn't preserve, but the Romani language is more conservative in some regard, in some aspect. So what is the philosophy of living and survival? What are the elements of this philosophy? At the first place, this is non-violence, the principle of non-violence. I think that all Roma will agree that Romani culture, our culture, is very non-violent, because Roma people are the only people coming to Europe who didn't conquer any other nation, who didn't conquer any territory in Europe. So being able to survive without exterminating other nations, without taking the land of other nations, without imposing your language, religion, and culture to other nations. This is a unique characteristic of our people. Because in human history, especially in European history, which is extremely violent, you either conquer or you are conquered. You are either a master or a slave. And part of Roma, especially the Romanian Roma, were actually slaves for 5 centuries in the principalities of Wallachia and Moldova. This is the territory of today, Romania. So for 5 centuries, they were slaves with legal status of slaves, exactly like the Black people, Afro-American people in the United States. But the world knows very little about the Roman slavery, while the American slavery, the Afro-American slavery in the United States is well studied and researched. And the Roman slavery is not so well researched and not well popularized. And although the Roman slavery existed longer than the slavery of Black people in America. The Roma were slaves for 5 centuries, as I have already mentioned. But these were only one part of Roma people. Some other people actually existed. They spent many centuries on the territory of the Ottoman Empire, on the Balkan Peninsula. Other had their lives in Russian Empire. Others migrated to Western Europe. Actually, Western Europe was most intolerant toward Roma in the Middle Ages. And many people know about the Holocaust, but not many people know that there were other genocides before the Holocaust. Holocaust is a modern, it's a modern genocide. It happened in 20th century. But in fact, Roma were persecuted and genocidal laws were implemented against Roma in 18th century, for example, in 18th century German lands, also in Netherlands, what is today Netherlands, the lowlands, Belgium and Netherlands, there were laws saying that anyone who kills a gypsy will be rewarded. Who can prove that he killed a gypsy will be rewarded. For example, if he shows the head, the cutted head of the victim, or the hand of the victim, or some other part of the body. So this was a very, very cruel extermination. And this is one of the reasons why the Roma are very few today in Western Europe. And most Roma are recent immigrants to Western Europe. Practically the original, the older Roma population of France, Germany, Belgium has almost been exterminated in 18th century, during 17th and 18th century. And I will tell you another very curious fact I will share with you. Many of you have probably heard about the so-called witch hunts in Europe. They were very popular in the Middle Ages. You know, there were trials against witches, witch trials. They were very popular. Mostly women, but also men have been accused in witchery, witchcraft, that they are magicians or witch and so on. But what is very interesting, what is very curious, is that, for example, in the German lands, the German principalities, the laws against the witches, according to the laws against the witches, if a witch is detained, she must be, there should be a trial, organized trial. It should be proved that she is a witch before she's eventually murdered. But in the case of Roma, according to the laws, if a Romani person is detained, he can be killed at a spot, at a place, without any trial. So while the witch trials were very, very popular, because they were trials where people come and listen and observe this event. These were very popular events, and thousands of people have been gathered. They were coming to see the execution of the witch. the Roma could be killed immediately at the place. All families, children, women, and men, by anyone. And this was that's why the so-called gypsy hunts were more cruel and devastating than the witch hunts, because you don't need trial, you don't need to prove anything to prove the guilt, to prove that the person is guilty. The fact that you are a gypsy, this means you are guilty, even if you didn't commit any crime, and they can kill you. And this is how we don't know, this is why we don't know the exact number of Romani people exterminated in 17th and 18th century in what is today Germany, France, Belgium, Netherlands, United Kingdom, because this was an earlier Romani genocide, earlier form of genocide. Another very interesting fact that's not very well known is that the anti-Roma laws, anti-Gypsy laws in Germany existed for long before anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish laws in Germany. Before the anti-Jewish laws, the adoption of anti-Jewish laws. I'm talking now about the Nazi era. Even before Hitler, Hitler came to power, before the time when he came to power, before 1933, we had in Germany anti-Roma laws adopted in different provinces, in different regions of Germany, like Bavaria, for example. So the anti-Roma stereotypes, anti-Roma persecution, anti-Roma sentiment, anti-Roma laws have very, very long history in Europe, and actually they are part of the European culture, European imagination, European, even European arts. Although very often Roma were presented as in a romantic light, in a very romantic light, but also Roma were presented as barbarians, as savages, romantic savages, people who cannot be civilized, people who live in the forests. Similarly, like native people in America, let's say, the United States, native people in Africa and other European colonies. But Romani people were considered the native, like, you know, in some sense, as the natives of Europe, as the savages of Europe. They were considered, they were seen in this light. And another very interesting thing I would share with you, while Europeans were going to conquer other people on other continents, Roma came in Europe. This is very, very interesting, because Europeans were going to Africa, Asia, Australia, and America, but Roma came from Asia to Europe and survived for 1,000 years. The elements of our Romani philosophy are non-violence, as I already mentioned, tolerance, because Roma are very tolerant people, and also you have among Roma people following different religions, and sometimes even in one family you can have people having different religions, and this is not considered, at least in the past, it was not considered as a problem in the family. I know such families where the man is Christian and his wife is Muslim, and children choose their religion. They have two sons. One son is Christian, the other son is Muslim. This is their personal choice. Of course, this is a rare practice, but it exists, and in all ancient times, it was a wider spread. We know this from legal documents, from different acts of the authorities prohibiting Roma Christians and Roma Muslims living together, because they were Roma didn't consider this, they didn't see a conflict in this, having different religions and living together. But this was considered as illegal, as something bad by the religious and political authorities in the European countries. So there was contradiction between the way, there was a contradiction, a conflict between the Romani perception of religion and the non-Romani perception of religion. We, in our language, we have special word for all people who are not Roma, and this word is gajo, singular, gaje, plural. And in this way, Roma, having this concept of non-Roma, Roma are among very few nations where such concepts about the other exist. Probably the Jews are also an example for this, where they have the word goyim, goy, or goyim means anybody who is not Jewish. The Japanese have this word gaijin, which means anybody who is not Japanese. I don't know about the other Indian languages, if they have such a word for the people outside community, but this is something that also something that helped us to survive. The fact that we had concept of the other, of the outer world, the other world. And there is one saying, there is one proverb in the Romani language, an old proverb, which will help you to understand how did Roma survive and why did Roma survive during all these centuries of persecution in Europe. This proverb says, Romesa gajo gajesa. It means a Romani person with Roma person, a gajo with gajo person. This is how Roma imagined the world. Yes, Roma were non-violent. Yes, Roma were tolerant. But at the same time, Roma were trying to isolate themselves in some degree from the non-Roma people in Europe. And for example, Roma married only Roma in the past. Only in recent time, we have mixed marriages where Roma people marry non-Roma people. So Romani person should stay, live, marry, cohabit with Roma person. And non-Roma person should live with non-Roma person. This is the essence of philosophy. And this essence, this philosophy has preserved, this helped us to preserve, to survive during the centuries. In recent times, Roma don't follow anymore this philosophy, Rom Romesa Gajo Gajesa, especially the integration policies during the last 100 years. They introduced a new way of thinking, new philosophy among the Roma, because it's not just it's true that Roma were persecuted, but it should be taken into consideration that Roma community itself was very conservative, very closed community in terms of language, culture, identity, family life. For example, for a very long time, Roma didn't want to share the knowledge about their language and their history with non-Roma people. Very often the scholars had problems because the Roma didn't want to tell them what is the meaning of the different Roma words. The Romani language has been considered a secret language for many centuries, because this was the language that helped us to hide, to survive, to communicate secretly, so the other people don't know what we tell each other. The language was very, very important element for the survival of Roma, very important factor for the survival of Roma. In recent time, Roma are losing the Romani language because there are only few universities in Europe where this language is taught. These are the university, the Karls University in Prague, Czech Republic. I think also in Paris, in Zagreb, Croatia, there is university where Romani language is taught. In Skopje, Macedonia, but these are very few. There are only 3 or 4 universities in Europe. And it's very, very sad that such an ancient language, which survived for 1,000 years, without books, without scholars, without priests, without any help from state or from any other people. This language is now endangered language according to UNESCO, because they say there are 12 million or 15 million, between 12 and 15 million Roma in Europe, but only, according to the scholars, only about 4 million of Roma still speak Romanes as their native language, as their mother tongue. And still Romani is not properly protected mother tongue in Europe. So it's an endangered language. This should be known. After 1,000 years, that's why we need now institutionalization. We need now schools. We need now universities where this language can be taught, researched, studied, disseminated as any other language. If we don't take these measures now, in 50 years, Romani language we don't know if it will survive in the times of modern technology and in our modern times. It survived because Roma needed the Romani language as a secret language for communication. But in today's time, with the integration of Roma among the surrounding populations, Roma now accept the languages of surrounding population. The Romanian, Bulgarian, more and more Roma speak other languages. And the number of Roma who speak their own Romani language, which is related to Sanskrit, the number of Roma who speak Romanes is unfortunately decreasing. So our philosophy about the life helped us to survive. Another very important component of this philosophy is something that some scholars, some writers call art of forgetting. The art of forgetting, or ability of Roma to forget the bad episodes of their history. For example, Roma don't have memory of the slavery in Romania, in Vlachia and Moldova, although it was 5 centuries, but Roma don't want to remember this cruel moments, periods of their life. Also, after the Holocaust, after the genocide during the Second World War, many of the survivors from the concentration camps didn't want to share with their children and grandchildren what they have lived through, their experiences. They didn't say, they didn't tell their children. And this is one of the reasons why the Romani genocide is not so well studied, because unlike the Jewish victims, the Jewish survivors, who were much more open to tell their stories, Romani survivors didn't want to share their stories from the Holocaust. So Roma have this mechanism, they use this mechanism, when something is too cruel, too bad, you don't tell this to your children, you don't transmit this information, transfer this information to the next generations, because you hope that in this way you will save them from these bad memories, bad luck, bad experiences so that your children don't need to suffer, don't need to experience this one more again in their minds, in their brain, but they should continue their life and they should have a lucky life, happy life, a concept of happiness in Romani culture, which is called Baht in Romani, another concept. Of course, this is also controversial because, yes, on one hand, it's good to not remember about the bad things in the past. But on the other hand, new generations, these new generations that are coming, if they don't know, if they don't remember what happened 70 years ago or 100 years ago, there is a risk that they can repeat the history. They can make the same mistakes. They can end up in a similar situation. And what we see now in Europe is the revival of fascism, a revival of Nazism in many European countries, both on the West and the East. And this creates a big danger. This endangers, this threatens the Roma, the future of Roma over the next years. Because when you have politicians like Meloni, whose party is a direct party is related to the party of Mussolini, the fascist party of Mussolini. You have Meloni now as a prime minister of Italy. It's a very serious signal, very serious, alarming signal that Europe is no more critical, no more so critical, so sensitive towards the threats of fascism. But on contrary, this so-called post-fascists, they call them post-fascists, means they were fascists once, but they are no more fascists. They changed their minds, now they're better people, and they should be integrated in political life, integrated in economic life, given power, given seats in the parliament. So when we see this, we Roma should be concerned about our own future in Europe, and we should think about what's going on, what's following next, because it's not just Italy, but it is now a common development across European continent. Of course, not only in Europe, it's a tendency in many other parts of the world. But because the majority of Roma live in Europe, we are concerned about the developments in Europe. And our philosophy about life and survival is now challenged because, as you know, probably, after the Second World War, Jews were recognized as victims of the Holocaust and were compensated, but Roma were not recognized as victims of the Holocaust, and it took about 30, 40 years of struggle after the end of the Second World War, 30, 40 years only until Europe recognized Roma as victims of the Holocaust as well. Only in 1982, West German government recognized Roma and Sinti in Germany as victims of the Holocaust. From 1944 till 1982, Roma who survived the Holocaust were denied justice, were denied compensation. Roma were not allowed to as witnesses at the Nuremberg trials, although it was clear that Roma also suffered during the genocide. So when we know all of this, how long it took us until Europe recognized that we also have been victims of the Holocaust. Knowing this, seeing what is going on in European countries, in the European governments, at political level, we have serious concerns. And our concerns are justified because Probably you know about this show program. You have heard probably that there is one very popular show program in the United Kingdom on Netflix media, where it was said there was a joke, they made a joke, and millions of people saw this joke, saw this program. And the joke was that while so many people know about the Jewish Holocaust, nobody talks about the Gypsy Holocaust, the Gypsy genocide, because nobody wants to discuss the positives of the genocide. So this was heard by millions of people over Netflix platform. And this program was not canceled. This TV presenter, this showman, he's a famous showman, his name is Jimmy Carr. He was not sanctioned in any way. And this clearly shows that there is a consensus in the European political establishment, among the establishment, that genocide against Roma was not so bad thing as the genocide against Jewish people. And it's not, if you say such things, you will not be sanctioned, you will not be punished. The reaction is not the same. I will give you an example from Bulgaria. I'm from Bulgaria originally, although I live in Germany. Now in my home country, which is the second country, after Romania by number of Roma population. First is Romania. Most Roma live in Romania. The biggest number of Roma live in Romania. Bulgaria is second. According to the, there are almost 1 million Roma people in Bulgaria, and the total population is about 7 million. And 1 million of these 7 million are Romani people. And they are only about 5,000 Jewish people in Bulgaria. But now Bulgaria has a coordinator, an official, a state official responsible for the struggle against anti-Semitism, to combat anti-Semitism. There is a state official at governmental level, while there is no official responsible for combating anti-Gypsyism. So anti-Gypsyism is not recognized as a problem at the same level as anti-Semitism. And this is a huge problem for us, because the number of Roma is much higher in Europe than the number of Jewish people, and Jewish people can rely on the support and protection from Israel and Israeli diplomacy, Israeli ambassadors in every European country, while we Roma cannot rely on any international diplomatic or other protection. And we are between 12 and 15 million people on this continent, while fascism is coming back. So this is a huge, huge challenge in front of the Roma people for the next decades to come. And here I would like to conclude, to end with my presentation. Yes, we survived for 1,000 years in Europe. We had, and we still have, a very peaceful, non-violent, tolerant philosophy. And we are very open, welcoming, and we have big hearts, and we accept everyone. But our future is under question, because we are surrounded by people who don't share the same philosophy about life. Because we are non-violent people surrounded by people with very violent philosophy, very violent histories. And this cohabitation, let's say, becomes more and more problematic. Because just think about this. The number of Roma doubled and maybe tripled during the last 50 years in Europe. Only for 50 years. And 50 years ago or 100 years ago, Roma were not so visible, but now Roma are very visible. Now more and more Roma get higher education. More and more Roma have better living standards, and it becomes very visible. Roma are no more in the margins of the society. Roma are no more isolated in the ghettos, but more and more Roma are now visible in the central parts of the city, visible in culture, in politics, in every aspect of life in these countries, European countries. And this creates even more, how to say, intolerance. The intolerance against Roma people in Europe is growing according to all sociological surveys which are available on Google, and you can find a lot of them. So how will Roma and non-Roma cohabit in Europe in the future? What will be the role of India in this process as a rising superpower, world power? What will be the position of India, Indian government, Indian scholars, Indian politicians? Because it's not just about art and culture, it's also about politics. And these are very, I would say, burning questions, very urgent questions that concern the Roma intelligentsia, the Roman intelligentsia, the educated Roma class in Europe. And of course, we are extremely interested, and we had this opportunity to discuss this with Zamir too. We are interested and we are looking forward to see the future policies of India, the future political agenda of Indian government regarding Roma people in Europe. Thank you very much for your attention. It was a pleasure for me. If you have any questions, I'm here for you.
Thank you very much, Orhan, for very eloquent speech, and you touched upon the different philosophy, the religious philosophy, social philosophy, cultural philosophy of Roma community. And you also pointed out how after, means the historical and long drawn persecutions, discriminations, prejudices, and stereotypes, Roma survived and Romani philosophy survived and surviving. And you also raised a very pertinent questions about the position and stand of India for Roma community. And I would like to give some information about what is our stand right now at present, but the time is short. But I can tell you that now there is a memorial is being constructed in Kannauj, and by the government and by the Culture Ministry of India. That the project already started. So that shows the government is very much interested and very much, they're standing in the solidarity with the Roma community. And you might have heard that now trend has changed. The ministers, the higher officials of the government, wherever they are visiting, they are officially meeting the Roma communities. You might have heard the news of our Minister of State, External Affairs Minister of State, visited Bulgaria and North Macedonia, where they called upon the Roma community and the Roma, the community representatives and individuals. So now the sensitization program already started, and the embassies and the other the other departments which are now considering and thinking of Roma community, and I hope that very soon it is going to be officially recognized. A lot of Indian politicians, the head of the states, they said on record that the Roma are the people of Indian origin and they are historical diaspora. So that is now at time. This is the stand of the government of India or the Indian departments. Now you talk about the philosophy. That is also very important. How this philosophy, the Romani philosophy, is analogous and similar to the Indian philosophy. As you said, the Roma are very much tolerant, non-violent, they are non-partisan, they are respectful to all religious orders, whether, as you also mentioned, that in one family the husband is Christian and whereas wife is Muslim. So how tolerant that community is. So Roma people and India, they bear on the same ideals. What kind of ideals? The ideals like a religious order, religious freedom, heterodoxy, acceptance, respect, and equality, which embodies the doctrine of the universal brotherhood. And that is a philosophy practiced, preserved, promoted by India, by Bharat, as well as Roma community. For that, now the virtual room is open for the question answer. So if anyone has a question or any remarks, he or she is very and most welcome. Thank you.
Here I will like to say, Mr. Orhan, we will send you the project of Kannauj Roma Memorial. If you want to add anything, you are welcome. I will request Jahid to send it.
Thank you very much. So now this room is open for question. Anyone, any question, please?
Hmm.
Yeah, Mr. Paksan, please. Unmute yourself, Mr. Paksan.
Yeah, I just unmute myself. I know that this is difficult for Orhan because I put the same question to him very personally, but you know, we have to decide what we are going to do. The position is very well outlined by even people who introduced Orhan and by Orhan himself, that we are in great danger today. We have to take steps. We had a Congress in Berlin, but it didn't solve the problems. There will be another one in 2 years' time. We need to make some very clear decisions about how to increase our political representation. That is, political representation through existing local government and central government, but also political representation through a democratic system of our own, by which everyone, every part of our diaspora can decide upon a collective representation that could help to steer us away from present dangers. So my question is, what do we do? And I'm also giving some ideas for a solution.
This question was towards me, Gratan, or?
It is a question for all of us, but of course you're the speaker this morning, so you're in the hot seat, Orhan. I hope you've got some idea.
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have much time because I need to leave you in 10 minutes, but what can be done? Yes, we were at this Congress in Berlin together with many people, and we discussed. Zamir was also there. The truth is that there are two elements for success, two factors. One is the internal factor. Let's say the internal mobilization of Roma, which Gratan mentions. So this is our own efforts, internal efforts in our own communities for self-organization, self-mobilization, self-representation, so on. But also there is a second factor. This is the external support. The external support, because we don't have access to the media, we don't have, this diplomatic international support. And only, in my opinion, this is in my opinion, only having these two factors simultaneously together, the internal mobilization and external support, we can achieve something, we can improve somehow our situation in Europe. because what we are lacking right now is the external support. This is my opinion, of course. That's true. We are very dispersed in many countries across Europe, but problems are very similar everywhere. And I think that we need to work in both directions for internal mobilization of our community and external securing external support for our agendas, for our political agenda for the future.
Thank you for that. Thank you. That's some direction.
Any more questions? Anyone, please?
Can
Any-
I ask one question from Mr. Orhan? If he's
Yeah,
there?
yeah. Please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, actually, I'm writing a paper with Professor Prashanthu sir, and it is about Roma language and judicial activism. So, as Orhan sir has told briefly about the language and the linguistics and the religion and about the culture, like in a family, how one is Christian, other is Muslim. So, while going through the paper, I came across one of the writers. His name is Petrova. He doesn't agree about the this fact that Romas have any relation to India. He says that this Romani language is actually influenced by Greek language, because and we call it Sanskrit nowadays, but actually these Greek language, some Greek words in the form of Sanskrit were added and included in Sanskrit, and that is how it became a base. Another writer, Adam, he talks about the new contact language, which was added during the Byzantine era, which is spoken in Greece, but it belongs to the Balkans and the Lax Romani branches. So it is quite confusing and contradictory. And had to ask very much, but only this one, right? As far as language is concerned, and if you are trying to connect it with Sanskrit language, so like, I'm interested to know about this. What is the truth?
Sorry, can you please repeat once more the question?
Sir, as we generalize that Romas are actually Indians, like they moved from Europe, they moved to Europe from India. And if we talk about the Romani language, as we all know, as you have said, that it is influenced by Sanskrit. But while I'm writing a paper, I came across some writers. One of them was like Petrova. He doesn't agree to the matter of fact that it is influenced by Sanskrit language. He says that actually that language was influenced by Greek language, and some of the Greek words were actually added to the Sanskrit language, which later on is like plays a role in connecting the fact that the Romani language is connected to Sanskrit. And one of the other author is Adam, who has written a paper in 2010. He says that during the Byzantine era, the dialects currently spoken in Greece belongs to the Balkans and the Vlax Romani community. So if the language is concerned, if the actual Romani language is concerned, how you will throw some light on this matter of fact that it is actually generated from the Sanskrit language? Like the mother language is Sanskrit. How do you connect this fact?
They are very, very profound, very in-depth studies on this, on the origin of Roma language. I'm not myself expert on linguistics, but what we know for sure is that the main, the basis, the grammatical, lexical basis of our language is the same like the modern North Indian languages, and they have common root. The majority of the biggest part, let's say, of the Romani words are derived from Sanskrit, more precisely Prakrit. This was the everyday spoken form of Sanskrit. Sanskrit was the literal, let's say, written language.
The mother language, actually.
It was the written language, the language of the priests, you know, but Prakrit was the spoken form, everyday people, the form that was spoken by, that was used by the everyday people. So they are Greek words. They are also Iranian, Armenian, and other words. But according to the scholars, these words entered the Romani language at a later stage of the development. So, for example, Greek language, the word from the Greek language are from New Greek, the last stage of development of the Greek language. There is Archaic Greek, Ancient Greek, Middle Greek, New Greek. And the words in our language come from New Greek language, which means that they were accepted, adopted only after contact with Byzantine Empire, after the migration, after arrival in Europe.
The Vlax Romani groups.
Actually, in all Romani groups, they are Greek loan words. They are loan words accepted from the Greek-speaking population after the arrival in Europe, because the entrance into Europe happened through the Balkans, through Asia Minor and the Balkans, through the Bosphorus. For this reason, it's absolutely certain. It's absolutely certain that our language originates from India, and Greek influence, linguistic influence came only later, at a later stage. It was not, our language is not essentially Greek language. It's not, these are completely different languages with very, very, you know, different structure, grammatical, lexical structure. So it's, there is no doubt about this. Of course, everyone can write whatever he wants, but this is the origin of the language is well established, like 200 years ago, and a lot of literature, a lot of studies have been written on this over the last 2 centuries. The ethnogenesis, the formation, identity formation, ethnic formation of the Roma as a community, as an ethnic group, is not so well recorded, not so well studied, because origin of language is one thing, but the formation of the people might be different story. So we know that different ethnic groups contributed, and it's also proved by genetic surveys, DNA surveys. Different ethnic group contributed to the formation of modern Roma. Modern European Roma are a result of a complex process, evolution, mixture, as any other population, any other nation in today's world is a result of mixture of different ethnic groups. It's true for French, for Russians, for Indians, for Iranians, for any other group, especially group with such a long history of migration. So about the language, it's undoubtful, it's proved well, it's well known fact, the Indian origin of the language. But the reconstruction of the migration, the reconstruction of the community, how this community was formed, what kind of components, what kind of elements participated in the formation of today Roma ethnicity is still an open question. Of course, peoples, ethnic groups from the Balkans, from the Middle East, were included in the ethnogenesis of the Roma people, the formation of the Roma people. And so the language is clearly showing, clearly pointing to India. It's absolutely sure. It's scholarly, scientifically proved. Of course, there are different hypotheses, different suggestions, different proposals. Everyone is free to write books, articles on these questions, and to propose different hypotheses, different suggestions. There are also people claiming that Roma originate from Israel, for example, and they are the lost tribe, lost Jewish tribe. But there are many extravagant theories, hypotheses, and this is the freedom of opinion, the freedom of expression. Of course, whether they are scholarly, they can be considered seriously from a scientific point of view is another question. But everyone is free to publish whatever he wants.
Okay, now there is no question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Orhan. And if there is no question, so now it's time to wind up the,
Can I
this.
just say a few brief words? And it was really very wonderful, Mr. Orhan. And this was a bonus speech, I would say. The reply you gave to my and Nitesh's paper. He had this doubt, we had discussed it earlier also, but you have put it very succinctly. And we have another linguist amongst us, Narayan Kumarji. So I think
Yes,
he
yes.
will also enjoy it and
Right.
he will enrich us later on. Thank you very
All
much.
right. Thank you very much, Professor Prasanansuji. So now it's the time to close. So we have our, honorary director, Shri Narayan Kumar ji. So as Prasanansuji mentioned that he is also one of the very prominent linguistics. And so now I humbly request Honorable Narayan ji to deliver the official vote of thanks. No, sir.
Thank you, Jamil, for giving this very pleasant task. It is my privilege to propose vote of thanks. At the outset, I will like to thank Orhans because his presentation was wonderful and brilliant and very systematic and scientific. Right from the beginning to latest position, he has explained about the political, educational, and all other condition of the Romani people all over the world. As far as India's position is concerned, after independence, our first prime minister, when went to Belgrade to attend this non-aligned conference, he went to at that time called gypsy villages, and he deeply interacted and he assigned work to Chaman Lal to write, and even embassies were by the government of India to facilitate him for writing that book that could to the real picture of gypsy, and after all we say Roma. When first Romani conference, official conference was held, our embassy, High Commissioner of India, deputed Rishi, Rajendra Rishi, and he represented government of India, and at that time the flag and other conditions and constitution were enacted. Then we have organized many conferences in India. Prime Minister at that time in 1983, Mrs. Gandhi spent two days to attend the Romani conference, which was organized by Rishi. And institution was open, library was open, and there were research scholars, but due to the lack of facility that could not continue, then Syam Singh Sasi and other scholars were working for that. Now, the Antarashtriya Sahyog Parishad, under the guidance of our Shyam Parande ji, has started this work, and we are doing our best to just teach Indian people that what Romani population is, how closer they are, and how cordial relation we have. As far as the language question of Romani language is concerned, it has rightly been mentioned by Orhans. It is indentured language, and as we all are aware, UNESCO has declared this year the year of indentured language. So Romani leadership should approach UNESCO how to save this language because this language has very old history. There is no debate about things. That Romani language has originated from Sanskrit and Romani population are from India. So there, yes, the freedom of speech and expression is there, but there should be some logical, scientific and historical evidence. Otherwise, freedom of speech doesn't work. Apart from this, I will say that you can't divide any language as in watertight compartment. As you have been mentioned about Greek language today, and even Sanskrit, Prakrit, Brans, Pali, Brant, Maithili, Hindi, it has come. So language has many imported and exported words in our own language. We have Hindi, we have French, we have Latin. So we shouldn't forget our Hindi is being spoken in Mauritius, Fiji, in South Africa, but they have their own language. They have the dialect have been introduced in those languages. So it's the characteristic of the language, not the drawback of the language. So we must accept it. That even in the Oxford University, everywhere we see university dictionary, we see thousands or hundreds of new words are coming from different languages. So once again, I thank all these speakers and Rajini ji her efforts for having a good memorial is loved worthy, and it will. I hope that it will be completed. You all should suggest how and when we should do it. Thanks again. Thanks to Jamil for very nicely conducting this program. Thank you.
And I'm confident that this conference will serve as a catalyst for change, unity, and progress. Let us strive together to create a world where every Roma person can thrive and their voice can be heard. Thank you, and I wish all of you a productive and enlightening life.
I shall also like to add that our Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, our Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, has confirmed that Romani population has Indian origin, and even our ministers have been instructed to forget in the various countries. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much, sir. Now it's time to close the lecture. And once again, on behalf of Center for Roma Studies and Cultural Relations, I extend our sincere thanks to all the participants, and we expect to your valuable presence in the upcoming events. Thank you very much. Thank you.